All right, let's talk about discipline. Not the old school, just try harder kind. We're talking about a science-backed mental toolkit you can actually use. We're going to dive into that internal battle that holds you back, and more importantly, give you the tools to finally start winning it.
Have you ever just sat there knowing you should be doing something productive, but you just can't? It's that feeling, right? That battle between what you know is good for you and what your body just wants to do in the moment. Well, I'm here to tell you, it's not a character flaw, it's not you being lazy, it's actually a biological reality, a fight happening inside your brain.
So this feeling, it actually has a name. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman calls it limbic friction. Think of it as this powerful primal resistance. It's that voice screaming at you to just stay in bed, to skip the gym, to put off that big project. Its only job is to keep you comfortable and save energy, even when that's the last thing you should be doing. So how do you fight back against this limbic friction? Well, you use something called top-down control. This is basically your conscious mind, the front part of your brain, stepping in and saying, nope, I hear you, but we're doing this anyway. It's the override switch. And this is key. Building discipline isn't about having some magical source of willpower. It's about getting really, really good at winning this specific internal battle. Okay, so how do we get better at this? How do we strengthen that top-down control? Well, let's get into our first tool, which is all about hacking your brain's reward system. The secret weapon here? It's dopamine. And here's the cool part. You don't actually have to finish the task to get the reward. The science is super clear on this. If you can just anticipate that future win, if you can really feel what it's going to be like to succeed, your brain will release dopamine right now, before you've even started. And that dopamine, that's the fuel that'll push you right through that initial friction. So here's how you do it. It's a simple 3-step process. First, define the win. And I mean really define it. What will that sense of accomplishment feel like? Get specific. Step 2, you have to consciously attach the effort, the hard work you're about to do, directly to that winning feeling. And third, and this is the magic part, you let yourself feel that reward now. Let that awesome feeling of future success literally pull you forward. All right, so you're using future rewards, you're getting motivated, awesome, but there's a catch. A kind of weird, counterintuitive twist that you absolutely need to know if you want to keep this motivation going for the long haul. See, it turns out our brains are a bit like toddlers. They get bored really easily, especially with predictability. If you reward yourself the exact same way every single time, that dopamine hit you get gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So what's the most powerful way to keep that motivation cranked up? Unpredictability. Let me give you an example. Let's say you get a fancy coffee every time you finish a 30-minute block of work. At first, it's great, but pretty soon your brain just expects it. The magic is gone. But what if you only sometimes get the coffee and other times you don't? Now your brain is guessing, it's in pursuit. And that state of maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't, is what keeps those dopamine levels high. And you have to be really careful of this trap. It's called dopamine layering. This is when you need like 5 different things to line up perfectly just to get started. You need your favorite music, your special pre-workout drink, the weather has to be just right, all just to go for a run. What you're doing is raising your motivation baseline. And pretty soon, a normal run with none of those things feels, well, boring. So every once in a while, try stripping those layers away. Just go for the run. It helps reset the whole system. Okay, so beating that initial resistance is huge, but it's only half the battle. To actually get better, to learn new skills, we need our third tool. And this one is all about how your brain literally rewires itself. Most of us think of learning as just, well, learning, but it's actually a 2-stage process. Stage 1 is intense focus. That's you, trying hard. And all that does is it basically puts a little flag on the circuits in your brain that need to change. But the actual change, the real rewiring, what scientists call neuroplasticity, that happens in stage 2, deep relaxation and, you guessed it, sleep. A great way to think about it is like a seesaw. You have to have periods where you're leaning way into the effort. We can call that having a forward center of mass. But, and this is just as important, you have to deliberately shift your weight back into a state of rest, of being flat-footed. The people who are best at learning and performing aren't the ones who just grind 24/7. They're the ones who are masters at switching back and forth between these 2 states. And here's a wild little trick to practice this on a tiny scale. It's called gap learning. Let's say you're deep in a focus session, working hard. Just stop, randomly. For about 10 seconds, do absolutely nothing. Stare at a wall, close your eyes, Just let your brain go idle for a moment. You're probably thinking, what's 10 seconds going to do? Well, what happens in that brief pause is absolutely incredible. Brain scans show that during those little gaps, your brain replays what you were just learning at up to 20 times the normal speed. Think about that. You are literally getting more practice in by strategically doing nothing. How cool is that? Okay, we've covered some powerful tools, but now we have to talk about the foundation that holds all of this up. Because honestly, none of these tools are going to work if this one thing isn't in place.
And that foundation is sleep. Plain and simple. You can try every single trick we've talked about, but if your sleep is a mess, your ability to fight limbic friction, to make dopamine, to focus, to learn, it all goes out the window. Great sleep is the ultimate performance enhancer. It makes everything better.
And here's the thing about great sleep. It doesn't start at night. It starts the moment you wake up. And there's a simple protocol for this, but it's pretty much non-negotiable. Within an hour of waking, you need to get outside and get 10 to 30 minutes of bright, natural sunlight in your eyes. And a couple of key rules here. No sunglasses, and it has to be outside, not through a window. The glass actually filters out the good stuff your brain needs. So what's actually happening when you do this? Two critical things. First, it triggers a healthy spike of cortisol, which is your daytime alertness hormone, wakes you right up. But second, and this is huge, it starts a 16-hour countdown timer in your brain, a timer for when to release melatonin, the hormone that makes you sleepy. So that morning sunlight is literally setting your body's clock for the entire day. And you can actually see why this timing is so crucial. A healthy cortisol rhythm has this big peak in the morning, which then slowly goes down all day. But when you don't get that morning light, that peak gets delayed or it flattens out. And that unhealthy flat curve is something scientists see all the time in people who are dealing with depression and, of course, really bad sleep.
Want a little pro tip to take this to the next level? Try getting a second dose of sunlight in the late afternoon, when the sun is lower in the sky. What this does is it makes the cells in your eyes a little less sensitive to light later on. It basically inoculates you against some of the bad effects of all the bright artificial lights and screens we stare at in the evening.
So look, if you take one thing away from all of this, let it be this. Before you try to optimize anything else in your life, optimize your sleep. It is the absolute bedrock. Everything else we talked about, all those cool mental tools, they're all built right on top of that foundation.
So there you have it. You've got the toolkit. You understand the science. You know what's happening in your brain when you feel that resistance. So the only question left for you is, what friction are you going to overcome tomorrow?